What's going on, everyone? I'm Zero, and welcome back to Zero Two, where today I'm coming back with another deck profile. Today I'm tackling a deck that was highly requested from one of my locals reports that I put out. So if you haven't checked out any of my locals reports, where I go over my games, the deck I played, and how the matches played out, go ahead and check my shorts that are on my main channel. I think they're a lot of fun and they're quick to watch, so go check that out. But today we're going to be tackling Materiactor. Materiactor is a deck that revolves around rank 3 Xyz monsters. I think this deck has really high quality cards in it. I think the potential of this deck with future support is quite strong. But I do want to start out by saying that this is not like a meta deck profile. This is not even a deck that I'm recommending anyone play in this format. So if you want to test it out, try it out at like your local level. I would say that that's pretty reasonable. You could probably do okay with it. But at a high level tournament, this is not the deck to choose by any stretch. But it is cheap, so it's not like it's too expensive to pick up at the moment. All of the cards are commons and super affordable. And like I said, I do think that the card quality on some of these cards are high. It's just that we don't have many Materiactor cards, and so the deck still has a ways to go in terms of potential new support. Without further ado, let's just jump into it and talk about the deck. We'll start with three of the vanilla Materiactor. This is Prima Materiactor. The deck revolves around monsters that are normal monsters. So this is a normal pendulum monster that's also a Materiactor name, meaning like works perfectly with the deck. It's level 3, so it helps you facilitate all of your Xyz plays. It's a dragon, which is really nice because all of the archetype is dragons and makes seals and stuff with that. But what I think is most important about Premium Materiactor is that it's a pendulum monster, meaning that it counts as a normal monster, but it also has a nice bonus effect to it. And its pendulum effect is when it's in the scale, you can target a Materiactor Xyz monster you control, you attach Prima Materiactor to it, and draw a card. That's really important because the whole gimmick behind Materiactors, besides spamming rank 3s, is to stack the top of your deck. So a lot of times you will be excavating and picking the order of the top of your deck, meaning that Prima Materiactor, when you have it draw, you already know what the draw is going to be. You've set it up, and it's probably going to be a hand trap or an extra interrupt or an extender whenever you need it. This card's absolutely insane. Moving on to the main deck, effect monsters. We've got three Materiactor Zepwing. Zepwing is the best starter and extender for the deck. It allows you to special summon itself from your hand if you control a Materiactor card. So it's really nice if you already control a Materiactor monster or one of their face-up spells. This is just a free extender from hand. And then on summon, it gets to search for any Materiactor card. Absolutely crazy. So it's a Stratos for the whole archetype. And if you have a normal monster in graveyard, which there are a lot of times where you've detached the Prima from an Xyz material, or you've discarded it for cost to activate some of your other effects, you get to revive back a normal monster from your graveyard. It specifically has to be level 3, but perfectly your Prima is that. So it represents a free rank 3 on its own, and it's the Omni Searcher, and it's just an extender from hand. Absolutely crazy card. The next Materiactor that we play is 3 copies of Materiactor X Raptor. X Raptor is another kind of extender. It's a kind of a starter because it does make a rank 3 on its own, but it uses your normal, which can be kind of annoying. But what it does is while it's in your hand, you can discard another card, special the X Raptor, and then search for a normal monster. So this is a way to see your Prima more consistently. It puts itself on the board as a body, as a level 3 extender, and it can then normal the Premium Reactor to make your first rank 3, which gets you off to the races. It also has an in-hand effect where you can quick effect discard it to make your Xyz monster gain 1500 attack. That comes up very rarely. I don't think I've ever actually used it in tournament, but in theory, if you need to beat over something big, or if your opponent thinks they can just swing over your X guard, you can surprise them with an X Raptor in hand to just boost it up and beat over their monster instead. And then the last Materiactor main deck monster is Gigadra. We only play one of it. It's still quite good. It allows you to discard a card to special summon a level 3 normal monster from your deck, so it also represents a free rank 3. And then if you discarded a normal monster to activate this effect, you can special summon any Materiactor instead. So quite strong, although a lot of times you want to keep your Primas in hand in order to get the draw effect. And it does lock you into Xyz summoning from the extra deck while it's on the field. So none of these other cards lock you, which is really nice. So you can make stuff like seals, because again, they're all dragons, but Gigador does lock you while it's on the field, so keep that in mind. You just got to turn him into Xyz body and then locked again, which is quite nice. But yeah, that's all the monsters, at least the Materiactor monsters. Let's move on to the Materiactor spells so we can get a more concrete understanding of their game plan. We play 3 of the field spell, Materiactor Melt Through, which on activation lets you look at the top 6 cards of your deck and put them back on the top of your deck in any order. Very strong. Sets up a way to stack your deck, so when you're either drawing cards off the Prima, or when I get through the spell effects, you'll understand why stacking your deck is even more important. But yeah, this card lets you set up the top of your deck, which is nice, but it also makes it so that you can discard a card, I believe. Or no, it's just pay 1,500. You don't even need to discard a card. Pay 1,500 life points and target a normal monster you control, and then Xyz summon a Materiactor on top of it. So you can turn your Prima Materiactor into a 1-card Xyz with the field spell, which means field spell plus Materiactor Prima is also still full combo, which is nice. So just giving you more ways to play. This is often a nice backup plan if your main combo gets interrupted. You can at very least normal summon your Prima and combo off, which is nice. And then its last effect, which is its most important effect, is non-once per turn. When an Xyz monster is summoned, you attach the top card of your deck to an Xyz monster you control. So, like I said, that's not once per turn. So you are going to be Xyz summoning a ton, and you want to do as much of it while you control Melt Through as possible. So that way you can keep stacking cards underneath your Xyz. I'll get to why that's important in a second. And in fact, the next spell will explain that. But just know that having cards under your Xyz means that you can recur them as resources, which is really the next spell, we also play 3 of it, is Materiactor Meltdown. It's a continuous spell, and it's important that this is a field spell and continuous spell respectively, because you can just activate these, and now your Zeptwing in hand is a nice extender, which is really cool. But Meltdown allows you to, during your main phase, so not on activation, so you can just activate this and then wait. But during your main phase, and this can happen every main phase, you can activate the top 6 cards of your deck. And first of all, you get to add a Materiactor card from among them to your hand. So it's a pseudo searcher. Only can grab cards from the top 6, but still quite good. Then you can stack the top remaining 5 or potentially 6. It doesn't have to add the executed one to restack the deck to the top of the deck. So you get to pick the order of your remaining cards. Again, stuff you're going to be drawing with Prima or attaching with Melt Through. And then last but not least, all part of still the same effect, you get to add back a card that's underneath your Materiactor Xyz monster to your hand. Or I think it's any rank 3. It is any rank 3. But most of the time that's under your Materiactor anyways, since that's when you're stacking up with materials. But what this means is that the cards that you top stacked off of either of these effects, and then put underneath your Xyz monsters, can just be added back for free. So that can be an extra hand trap. That can be an extra extender. Whatever you need off of Meltdown, you can basically get. Because again, you're stacking your deck, so you know exactly what you're going to be attaching with the summon effects. And if that wasn't all, Meltdown also has an attach effect that's not once per turn. And it's whenever you activate an Xyz monster effect. So there are going to be quite a few Xyz monsters that will go through both summoning and using their effects, while both Melt Through and Meltdown are on the board for our ideal turn 1 combo. And so you're going to be getting close to 6 or 7 materials stacked under your main monster with no troubles at all. And again, those are all or mostly from cards that you stacked on the top of your deck. So you know you're getting hand traps under there that you can add back off Meltdown, combo pieces that you can add back later, monster effect that we'll get to. But yeah, absolutely crazy. And then the fact that it's a continuous spell and you can do this every single turn, like it's not just a non-activation, is really nice, because once this card is out, it can keep snowballing into advantage. You keep getting to search every single turn and get the add back and get the stacking of your deck every turn. Super nice. I'll leave these out while we talk about the next Materiactor card. It's the last one we play, and it's Materiactor Critical. It's their counter trap, and it basically says Omni negate for anything as long as you add back a material from underneath monster you control, or specifically a Materiactor. And then depending on what you added back, you have to do some stuff. So if you add back a monster, you do have to put a card from your hand back on the bottom of the deck. So you don't gain the advantage if you add back a monster, but if you add back a spell or trap, you do either get to get a boost in attack, or you can immediately set the trap if you add it back. We're not playing very many traps, so the trap one doesn't come up very often, but a lot of times you're using this to just negate something and add back another hand trap to put more pressure on your opponent. Absolutely insane. Searchable with either Zeptwing, Meltdown, or the Xyz that we'll get to, so it's really easy to get to. Although not all your combo lines always go too critical. It's quite strong, but sometimes you really do search the Meltdown or the Melt Through, so you're getting maximum value. But when you can search it, it can be like the cherry on top of a really. And then the honorary Materiactor cards, we're playing one copy of Full Armored Xyz. As you might imagine, the Armored Xyz cards are quite strong, as their starting basic one is a rank 3. Means we can make it super easily. And then again, every time we're Xyz summoning, we're getting a material from Melt Through. Every time we're using one of the Armored Xyz effects, we're getting a material off of Meltdown. And the Xyz monsters all have really strong, powerful either draws or searches, meaning that we can draw or search the cards that we stacked or stack to the bottom. Make sure we don't draw the bricks. Like, if this card's on the top of your deck, you can always just kind of put it towards the bottom of your 6 card stack with either Melt Through or Meltdown, and then you don't have to worry about drawing it or accidentally attaching it. And then the honorary Materiactor monsters are 3 copies of Terror Top and 1 copy of Takatomborg. This deck does struggle through pieces of interruption. A lot of times, just interrupting their first play or their first Xyz summon can be really devastating. So having Terror Top as a way to get to a rank 3 without using your normal summon is really nice, because that makes the pushes a lot more versatile. You can play through more. This makes your boards a lot stronger, because Terror Top can represent a potentially even gate where you start comboing off, which is quite nice. So gotta play these. These are the best cards to open with the start. Absolutely crazy. And that's it. That's the entire engine of the deck. So all of the rest of the deck is non-engine. We're on, I believe, 22 main deck engine, which leaves us 18 non-engine slots, which means that this deck is really flexible. I think that's the main selling point of this deck, and why I think it has the potential to be really strong in the future with just a couple extra pieces of support, is that because you're stacking your deck and you're choosing which cards to pick up from, and the fact that we're able to play 18 cards that are non-engine in order to pick from, you can be prepared for almost every deck in the meta at any given point in time. And so this 18 non-engine shifts quite heavily. And it will shift from my deck profile to reflect whatever tournament, whether it's your locals or whatever you want to bring this to kind of reflect against whatever you think will be most prevalent there. And that'll be more evident when I go through these. But for starters, this format, I think 3 Ash Blossoms non-negotiable. We can get to Ash Blossom, like I said, quite consistently, or really any hand trap in this lineup, based on the fact that we're excavating 6, so we kind of get to pick and choose what we want. In that same vein, I feel like Moltermi Fualos is also almost a non-negotiable. Being able to shut down and force your opponent to make half boards is really nice for this deck, because this deck does struggle to play through interruption, like I said. So keeping your opponent off of their full insane end board with Fualos is quite nice. The downside to Fualos, I guess, is that it's a hand trap that you can't like add back to your hand and then use later, because you probably have pieces on the board already. But you'll see the philosophy with these is we're trying to play as many hand traps that do something when they get added back. So we're playing Effect Veiler. We're playing Effect Veiler over Impermanence, specifically in this deck, because if you add Effect Veiler back to your hand, it's not dead on your opponent's turn, whereas if you added Imperm back to your hand, it doesn't. So having the Effect Veiler, quite nice. A way to stop your opponent from comboing as best you can. Playing 2 Nibiru, 1 Ghost Spell, and like I said, this is where the deck gets really wacky, because we can search and choose which hand traps we want in any given, uh, matchup. Essentially, we can afford to play a lot of these one ofs to like play into our options. So I'm playing a lot of these one of hand traps, or 2 of hand traps in the case of Nibiru, because I think Nibiru is particularly strong this format, especially when paired with another hand trap like a canine board or something like that. But Nibiru is quite strong, and it is nice to have as like something you add back. You can still activate. It does clear your own board, but if your opponent is going to be breaking your board, which this deck does put up a solid board, but it's not unbreakable. So having the Nibiru as like that extra insurance, like even if you break my board, I'm going to keep you off of winning the game with Nibiru is quite nice. Then we're playing a smattering of one ofs. The Perulia is really in here to play as our cross out target. We're playing the three one of going first staples in talents, call by, and cross out. Cross out's just so nice in this deck because we're playing so much non engine that we can have so many different targets for cross out against us. Something to consider playing too, especially in your side deck, is Droll, because Droll against this deck is quite strong. I do think that Droll is falling out of favorability in the format, hence why I'm not playing it here, because it's not very good into the top decks. But against this deck specifically, like Droll can be lethal, so making sure that you have that in your side, at least as a one of. Because again, just as wacky as this main deck gets, the side deck can also get super wacky because of the fact that you have the ability to kind of like pick and choose which non-engine you want to add based on their 6 excavates every single turn. So you can kind of figure things out and really play adaptively. So Lancia's in here because my locals format has quite a bit of malice floating around even still. So I want something in the main deck that I can potentially get to Malice. And it's nice because if I don't play against Malice, even though it's main deck, I can just put it as the 6th card when I excavate it back on the bottom, and then I'll never basically have to see it again. There are plenty of ways to like reshuffle your deck or make sure you don't draw it while you're comboing. Makes it so that it basically doesn't do anything or doesn't hurt your hands. You'll never have to draw it if you don't. Unless you hard draw your one. So be it. But I think the upside of having it potentially beat Malice or Crystron is quite nice. But yeah, that's the main deck. Again, this portion is quite flexible. You can kind of play whatever smattering of hand traps you think are appropriate for the current format. I think that these are the ones that I'm going with for when I've put this deck list out, which is relatively early Justice Hunters. But again, the key perks of Materiactor is that it can play a variety of non-engine and search it through its main combo, so that way you can adapt to any given metagame. Moving on to the extra deck, we played 2 copies of Materiactor X Guard. This is the best Xyz in the deck, and arguably one you might even want to play at 3, but I think 2 is fine. One of this deck's main weak points is it doesn't have much grave recursion. Once you've used and expended your resources, they're kind of stuck there without a great way to get it back. So future support for this deck, I hope, solves that problem with just like another rank 3 that can attach materials from graveyard, and then we're like chilling, really really strong. But X card's a custom card. It allows you to detach a material from it to either add any Materiactor spell trap from deck to hand, so any way to search your field spell or your continuous spell or your counter trap, whatever you need. Or if you don't want or need any of those extra spell traps, you can summon any Materiactor from deck. So it's either a Omni Rhoda for your spell traps or a summon from deck tour guide, essentially. Absolutely insane. And that's just the first effect. Its second effect is its main form of interruption, which allows you to, upon your opponent's turn, whenever they normal or special summon, take 2 materials attached from underneath it, including a Materiactor, and add them back to your hand. So over the course of your combo, you're going to be stacking up your X guard with, like I said, 6 to 7 materials by the time you pass back to your opponent, which means that you're going to have your pick of hand traps underneath it that you can add back when your opponent tries to do something in order to contest their plays, giving you just another layer of interaction. And if that wasn't all, if you have a normal monster in grave when you activate that, which is pretty easy to set up with most hands, you also get to bounce a card they control. It's, like I said, insane. This card is really, really strong. And like I said, it gets like 6 to 7 materials underneath it over the course of your combo. So you're going to be able to also translate it into a really large Zeus, which is spoilers. We're definitely playing Zeus in our Xyz deck that stacks materials. It'd be crazy not to play Zeus. A lot of times, turn 3, once your opponent's like half cracked your board, but you still have your X guard, like you can turn it into, or even if they have cracked it and you need to make your second X guard, you can very easily with a battle phase make 8 material Zeus, no problem. And then what's your opponent gonna do against four quick effect board wipes? Like not much. We do play the one Gigaboros. This card's okay. I don't really think it's like necessary, not as much as X guard. So if you do want to cut it for the third X guard, I would understand. There are some lines where it comes up, and I guess I'll explain its effect real quick. First off, it gains 500 attack and defense for each card in your hand, which like doesn't really synergize with your strategy all that much. I should mention, I forgot. Primo Materiactor's most important part of its effect is the fact that it does that draw. Hence why it's the only one I mentioned. But it does also have an attacking effect, where your monsters, or your specifically your Xyz monsters, gain 100 attack for each Xyz material on the field. Which, when you have like 7 or 8 stacked under X guard, is not insignificant. That can help you push for game. But I digress. Gigaboros is another way to push for game. Like you do draw a lot of cards over the course of your main combo, so this guy can get quite large and swing in for a solid amount of damage. And then the nice part about his effect is that he has a quick effect to during your opponent's turn add back a card attached to it to hand. So it's another way to like add back a hand trap if you're able to make both X guard and Gigaboros. But in my opinion, there are other threes that you should go into that are just better than Gigaboros. Its last effect does allow you to detach a material to attach a Materiactor from your deck, which is the only reason I play it, is because there are times where you do want to get an extra Materiactor into rotation, especially like a Prima in some scenarios. And so being able to have a way to consistently get that into your graveyard or back to your hand is sometimes nice, but this card is quite cuttable. Moving on, let's do this in the proper order, the way I set it up. Let's go on to the best cards in your extra deck, and they're the Xyz, Armored Xyz cards. Xyz Armor Torpedo is a rank 3, and we play 2 of it, which is very like non-standard. Most people only play 1, but I think 2 is absolutely fantastic for this deck. Not because there's any real need for you to go through the line more than once. You'll almost never do that. It's more so the fact that this card is just insane on its own in this deck, because when you Xyz summon it, if you have the field spell up, you get a draw. Or not a draw, but a attached to your Xyz monster, which is essentially like a draw because you can add it back on your opponent's turn. And then you can attach 2 materials from this card to draw a card. Because we're stacking our deck, we know what that draw will be most of the time when we're summoning Torpedo. So we basically get to search any of the hand traps from our 6-card Excavate. This is how you get one of your main draws outside of Prima. So you basically get 2 cultivated hand traps to your hands every single time, full combo, because this just translates into so much. And then you get to Xyz summon this on top of this once you've done the draw to get another attach under your X guard, and then this gets to detach to search your full armored Xyz, which gives you pressure with Dark Knight Lancer. But because you activated an Xyz effect, you also get another attach under X guard. Like this engine synergizes so well with the 2 Materiactor spells, or at least face-up spells, because it just gives you so many. Insane. Or again, I say draws, equips and or draws. It's kind of a mix of both, but they're kind of one and the same due to the way this deck plays. Then on to some utility rank 3s. Gossip Shadow is very important because it takes 2 level 3s to make. It can take 2 plus, but you almost always make it with 2. This is your Nibiru insurance. This deck does lose very hard to Nibiru, but in very strong hands, you can make it so that you can make Gossip Shadow before committing your normal summon. Your opponent still can Nibiru you before you can make the Gossip Shadow, but at least having this in the extra deck and showing it to your opponent in a game where they don't respect it makes it so that your opponent has to Nibiru at certain times that allow you to continue to combo if they do so. And then it's also just like a monster effect change, which is pretty neat. Like it is an interaction on your opponent's turn if they don't Nibiru you, which is. Then we play a Shuriken. Shuriken is a rank 3 that gives you a monster negate. The reason why it's worse than Gossip Shadow in a lot of scenarios is because it needs 3 plus level 3s. So it can be harder to make. This deck does spam out 3s, but not necessarily 3 on the board at the same time all that often. But this is an important card to have in case you're pushing for game. This deck does struggle to put out large amounts of damage and large attack points, even though it can keep your opponent relatively controlled with all of its non-engine. So having a Shuriken in here to help push for game because it can attack at times equal to the number of materials it has helps you just OTK through pretty much everything. Solid card to have, and just the monster negates nice too. We play Fortune Tune. We're a rank 3 deck that plays Zeus, so might as well have Fortune Tune as like an absolute backup plan for if we're in a really tough spot. This can swing into anything. Your opponent can't target it. Destroy you detach, so super super hard for your opponent to interact with Fortune Tune. Almost guarantees a Zeus, and then that can help you clear your opponent's board so you can start building. And then onto some utility links. We play Hermetic Seals. As I mentioned before, every single one of our Materiactor monsters is dragons. So there are times if you get like debarriered or your opponent hand traps you enough, it might just be correct to go into Seals in some game states just to hope that the balance is enough to keep your opponent off the board. And you can summon impactful stuff on your opponent's turn, like summoning Zept Wing to get a search and an extra body is quite nice in some scenarios. Um, but it is, kind of a backup plan, not something you always go for. Then we play Striker Dragon and SP, kind of for the same reason of like, if we need a backup plan to go into, we can always make Striker Dragon because we have a bunch of level 4 lower dragons, and then convert into SP, which can out problematic monsters. Strong piece of both going second removal and potentially going first installation. But these are again, like I said, plan almost D of the deck. Like if you're having to go into these, you're in a tough spot, but it's nice to have them in this scenario. And then we play Typhon as the last card. If all else fails, you can probably slap a Typhon on the board and at least annoy your opponent. Again, you play so much non-engine that sometimes Typhon, backed up with like 3 or 4 extra hand traps, can do some solid work into established boards and really simplify the game state to where you have a chance to top deck like a Zept Wing in the game. But it's in here as like a real panic button, backup button. It doesn't feel good to summon it, but and I brought out Zeus earlier. I don't need to explain why we this. Card's crazy, absolutely insane in this deck. One of the main benefits of stacking all. But yeah, that's the deck. I think it's really cool. I think the play style behind Materiactor is quite interesting. No other deck plays the way that Materiactor does, with like the stacking your deck and then getting to take advantage of that. I think that's really really cool. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and shuffle up my deck and get ready to go to the test hand portion of the video. We're going to be doing it a bit differently because the deck plays so differently depending on each hand. Like there are some set combos, but for the most part, you kind of have to play with what you get. So I think it's a lot more beneficial for you all as the viewers to see me play out test hands rather than play deck from like some sort of set, like 1 to 2 card combo. So yeah, I'll go ahead and transition over to that. Alrighty, so here we are with the combo portion of the deck, and I've just shuffled everything up, so I'm just going to go without further ado and jump into it, drawing our 5 card hand, because there's going to be a lot to talk about when we're in our hand. Got Melt Through, Takatumborg, Melt Through, Cross Out, and Prima. So this hand doesn't look great. There's not too much we can do that's crazy, but believe it or not, we can still combo. So I'm going to show off. This is proof that I'm not like scripting these hands. Like this is probably one of the worst hands the deck can produce, but we can still. And it all starts by activating our Melt Through. And our Melt Through is going to mandatorily excavate the top 6, and we get to stack them in a order. So we get these 6. What I think we're going to want is our Ghost Bell underneath our Xyz monster. And that is the only thing we're going to get to do off of this excavate. We're not extra draws or anything because of the way we're going to have to play this. So the rest of this order doesn't matter. We're just going to stack these on top in whatever order we want, and the Ghost Spell, importantly, goes back to the top of the deck. From this position, we're going to normal summon our Materiactor Prima Materiactor, and then we're going to use Melt Through effect to Xyz summon using just our Prima. And that's going to make us our X card. Then, because we Xyz summoned, we can go ahead and attach the top card of our deck to our X card. Surprise, surprise, it's our Ghost Spell. And then, like I said, the reason that it doesn't really matter what the rest of our deck was is because we're going to need to use our X card's effect here. We're going to detach Prima, and that's going to go ahead and special summon from our deck a Materiactor monster. We're going to choose our Zepwing. Our Zepwing is then going to trigger here. Because it was special summoned, we can add any Materiactor card from our deck to our hand, and then because we have a normal monster in graveyard, we get to revive it. So we're going to go ahead and add newest spell, Materiactor Meltdown. You could maybe consider going for the critical here. I don't know. I personally think it's wrong. I think you should go for Meltdown if you don't have it, because this is going to allow you to stack and set up so many like attaches and draws as opposed to not doing so. So I think that this is definitely play. And then we get to summon back our Prima. There would be some concerns about Nibiru. We did draw a cross out, so we're not going to play around Nibiru this time, but there are a lot of hands where you do have to play around Nibiru, so just keep that. We're not going to play that way this time. We will activate our Meltdown, and we're going to subsequently use our Meltdown's effect. We're going to excavate the top 6. We see it's X-Raptor, Gigadra, Effect Veiler, Called by, Effect Veiler, Lancia. So this is where things get important. So with our Meltdown, we get to start by adding one Excavated Materiactor card to our hand. I think for our purposes, we'll just add the X-Raptor. I don't know if we'll actually end up using it, but it's nice to just have a 3 in hand that we can extend with in case things get a bit wonky or we get hand trapped or something like that. And then this putback is important. So we're going to assume we're not playing against Malice. So I think that Lancia is the weakest, and we're going to put that on the bottom. Our ordering here is important because we're going to get a attach off of Melt Through when we summon our Armored Exceed. So the first thing on top is going to be an attach. Then we're going to get a draw with the Armored Exees, so that's going to be a draw. And then we're going to get another attach because we activated an effect, so a third attach. So I think we do want Gigadra because we're going to need a material under X card that is a Materiactor, so the third attach should probably be Gigadra. The draw makes sense to be Called by the Grave because attaching it doesn't really work for our purposes. And then I think the third attach should be Effect Veiler. So one of the Effect Veilers goes back now. We'll make the Gigadra the third attach, I guess. Make the Call by the Grave the draw, and we'll make the Effect Veiler the attach. Then the last part of Meltdown lets us add that Ghost Spell that we attached to our hand. So we already searched one hand trap. We're then going to overlay these two into our Armor Torpedo. And that's going to trigger our Melt Through because we Exceed Summon to attach the top card of our deck, which, whoa, it's an Effect Veiler. No way. Very cool. That'll be nice because our X card on our opponent's turn gets to add that back. Then we'll detach 2 from our Torpedo, which lets us draw a card. And we draw that Call by the Grave we stacked. So we've already searched another hand trap or a piece of non-engine. Really strong. That triggers our Meltdown because we activated an Xyz monster effect, and we can attach that Gigadra. So now the add back effect of X card is confirmed black. And then we can go ahead and Xyz summon our Armor Torpedo into our Armor Fortress, which gives us another attach on summon, which is our Effect Veiler that we put back. So we actually got an extra attach that I didn't account for, but it's a good thing that we put it back in a priority order regardless. Like, you should almost never just put back willy-nilly unless you know you're going to be excavating again soon. The order of the top of your deck is very, very important in this deck, as you can see. But yeah, so we already have another Effect Veiler rotation if we need it for future turns, and we put a normal monster into our graveyard, so that way our X card gets a bounce, which is awesome. We'll go ahead and detach from our Fortress to go ahead and search for our Armored Exees. We get to add that to our hand for an extra piece of interruption. We'll go ahead and shuffle up because, of course, we activated another Xyz monster effect, which is going to put another material under our X card, this time with Talents. Not great, but it's something we could add back on. And with that, we're going to have to set the rest of our hand and pass. But what we've got set up here is we've got a potential cross-out negate, or a play through a one-hand trap, a Call by the Grave interaction, or a play through a second hand trap. We've got Ghost Spell in hand. We've got the full Armored Exees to rank up into our full armored Dark Lancer for a monster steal on our opponent's turn, which will not only trigger our melt through and melt down for an additional 2 more materials, giving us 6 materials under our X card on our opponent's turn. But we also get to add back either our Effect Veiler or our Triple Tactics talent, depending on if we want more interactions with our opponent, plus our Giga Draw, which is an extra guaranteed rank 3 on our follow up turn. So yeah, as you can see, this deck plays quite strange. It felt like all we were like stacking our deck and then having to plan out like multiple different like attaches and draws in a row, and it is something you need to consider while you're playing this deck because it can be hard when you've got so much you're working with to play at a reasonable pace. So I would say practice, maybe use this video as reference to understand what the ordering of the cards needs to be in order to get your desired result, whether that's draws or attaches. And again, if you have another way to get to Prima Materiactor, which I suppose we could go summon Exoraptor and then add the Prima and get another draw. I don't necessarily think that's worth it because that draw is not going to be stacked, thanks to the fact that when we add the Prima from deck to hand, we're going to have to shuffle it anyways. But you can get an extra draw off of that. It's just the Exoraptor sits awkwardly on the field, and I'd much honestly rather have it as an attack boost to protect something like my Dark Knight. But yeah, that's one version or iteration of how this deck can combo. Like I said, the way this deck combos is wildly different with every hand that you have, which is also part of the fun of this deck. It feels like you're almost solving a puzzle while you're playing. It's really cool to like know your draws, set up your draws for in case like you are in a suboptimal hand state. Again, this was one of the weaker openings of this deck. And I say weaker because I think it's really vulnerable to hand traps. Like any hand trap on any of our like starting attempts at comboing would have had us just passing on nothing, which really sucks. But it still puts up the solid full end board of like the X guard with the bounce, these armor pressure, and all of the draws and searches, which is like really fantastic. This deck is relatively consistent. It still is missing a little bit of consistency and a lot of recursion, but I think it's still quite competent for the state it's in now. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate everyone who stuck around through the whole profile and combo tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about any of my combos or deck building choices in the comments. I'd love to discuss more. I think this deck is really cool and I'm quite passionate about it. So love to discuss more about this deck with other people who have played it or are interested in playing it or have questions about how the deck plays in the comments. Like I said, I talk about it there. And then if you like this kind of deck profile, you want to see more in-depth deck profiles in the future, one, let me know down in the comments what decks you want to see next. I'm always open to suggestions. But two, go ahead and like and subscribe to the video so that way I know that I'm doing it right and this content. But with that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!